So you must have remembered the title of my talk. That's pretty short. Sorry about the voice though, but my name is Chase. I'm from ALTO.io. I'm the CEO of the company. Co-founded the company a couple of months ago. But basically what we're trying to do at ALTO is to create a platform or a suite of tools, at least to say, that allows game developers to easily create tokenized items on the blockchain, pre-sell it, and then connect it into blockchain in itself. What we're trying to accomplish here is to make the barrier to entry for tokenized items really low, so that people, not just developers, but also game enthusiasts or those who wants to create their own tokens, to actually connect it to the blockchain and easily create it through the tool and the platform. So that's the optimized title right there. I think much easier to remember than what you have on the paper at the moment. But basically, the core idea here of why we thought about this was ushered in by the success of ERC-721 items coming from the likes of CryPTOGAME, for example, and the succeeding ones that came after, which sort of like gave us a bit of confidence in terms of like what the value that ERC-721 and non-fungible tokens can bring into gaming in the blockchain. Okay, I don't know how this works. This one. All right. So why do we put gaming on the blockchain? There's a couple of reasons why. Some of these reasons may not necessarily be true as of the moment, but that is something that we are all trying to realize as a community of gamers and game developers who's also trying to make sure that games on the blockchain succeeds. Big part of that is real item ownership, which hasn't happened in the past before. In the past, we're looking at items to be part of games, and whatever you purchase, whatever items you have in the game, disappears once the game is already done, right? Games on the blockchain provides for safe blockchain storage of items as well. And as of the moment, it's not yet frictionless, but in the future, hopefully, we have like a more frictionless facilitation of payments for tokens and games on the blockchain. I think one of the most important parts as well is that developers with games on the blockchain can now create new game economies that are somewhat still suppressed at the moment because they're working with restrictive platforms that doesn't allow them to expand what they can do with the game that they wanted to pursue. So status quo at the moment, and I think everybody, game developers and game publishers alike can attest to this, that at the moment it's very centralized. It's basically the app stores, it's basically Google Play Store, it's basically Steam as a platform where you can put in your game titles and try to succeed from there. Big portion of that comes into the fees and platform cuts that obviously gets taken away from developers as they put their games up on discovery on these platforms. And there's this thing about monetization regulation, right? Given that you're part of a platform, obviously there is a lot of like rules and sets of guidelines as to how you can monetize your items, how much you can monetize your items for, and you're bound by these strict rules and regulation. And the last one would be, when you're part of these centralized platforms, there is no real item ownership. It's basically lent to you for the duration of the lifetime of the game, right? So basically what happens here is that these items that you purchase, it's temporary up until the game server dies or ends, right? So that's sort of like what's happening right now in the gaming scene. And one of the biggest problems, I think, coming from a game publishing background, so I worked as a CMO for a gaming company in Shenzhen in China for the last 4 years in R2 Games. And one of our biggest pain points so far, even though we already have the monetary capacity to push forward our games in terms of marketing, in terms of user acquisition, is that there is a certain level of percentage on a free-to-play game where you can become marginally profitable. And that requires a lot of money coming out as far as user acquisition is concerned, as far as marketing is concerned. And it is very restrictive, especially for those that doesn't have the capacity to get this amount of money out for them to be able to make their game successful. So only at least about 1.8 to 2.5% of gamers pay in freemium games. So we're talking about free-to-play games. You have to have at least a huge amount of DAU for you to be able to at least get that sweet spot of 2.5% of people paying in your game. The rest are not paying. The rest are, free, right? Next maybe games require high number of users for them to be profitable. This is what I'm saying, where generally my goal with user acquisition is to make sure that we have enough daily active users for me to be able to meet that sweet spot of 2.5% to make that game slightly profitable. And unfortunately, most game developers, and we're not talking about like big game developers. We're not talking about the supercells and the top 20 game developers that are in the App Store. We're talking about the regular ones that are trying to make ends meet. They don't have the massive marketing budget. They don't have that money for them to be able to push for massive user acquisition, massive marketing. I mean, I'd rather, as a game developer, put that into making the game better, making the game more optimized. And because of that, it just makes it really restricted for these game developers to push for a really good game, but doesn't see the light of day just because of the fact that they're drowned out into the discovery system of these platforms that we know of at the moment. And lastly, the problem is that not everybody is lucky to get a publishing deal. And this holds true to some of the game developers that I work with, particularly even for my co-founder, Gabby, who has a gaming company called Altitude Games. Day in and day out, every conference season, he hustles, makes sure that he tries to find a publisher that will publish his game. That happens on a yearly basis. You go to GDC, you go to China Joy, you go to all these conferences in the hopes of finding a publishing deal that will push forward your game. Because if not, then it's going to be very difficult for them to succeed. And so what happens is that they try to self-publish, put in a little bit of money on marketing, but that doesn't last very, very long, right? At some point, you're going to run out of money, and you go like, what am I going to do now? Like, am I going to fold? Am I going to just continue putting this on the App Store without any discovery at all? Or am I just going to go back and think of another game? Hopefully, it becomes viral, because that way you might have a fighting chance in succeeding. And that's a real problem that most game developers are really facing. And just to put it into perspective, 1% of publisher makes 94% of the money. And the 99% of publisher splits the remaining 6%. So what it means is that big game developers really dominate the app stores. And I don't think that's about to change, right? I know for a fact that Apple tried their hardest, or is trying their hardest, to make it as indie-friendly as possible. Google is also doing their part of making sure that indie developers succeed as well. They do have like an indie corner kind of like section in the App Store. But the biggest chunk of discovery still happens on the primary markets within Google. And this is a problem that I think needs to be addressed, and I think that blockchain is something that is possible for us to be able to leap through in a certain bounds and leaps to make sure that this at least gets resolved. In a way, what I'm saying is that as a person coming from a premium game or freemium game, I think freemium game is very oppressive. It is very oppressive because the kind of business model that it sort of like wants to deploy to everybody is that developers with most marketing dollars benefit the most. And those that doesn't have any marketing dollars to benefit the most, they probably will at some point just die on the wayside. So how do we level a new business model for this one? What can we create to create a business model for this one? At this point, right now you have a premium game. Premium games, you're talking about $1.99, talking about $4.99, whatever the amount is on Steam, whatever the amount is on Apple. They see a fair level of success because of the fact that it's a fully furnished content, right? But it's not as scalable as a free-to-play game where the returns are massive. I mean, you always lose out on free-to-play game because of the fact that nothing can compare with free. It is free anyway, right? And at some point, you monetize out the psyche and the content of everybody else who's playing the free-to-play game, and you're able to actually create something really, really great, at least if you're on the developer side of things or the publisher side of things on a free-to-play game that's very successful. What we're trying to push for right now is what we call an item-first economy. And when I say item-first economy, we've seen this with the likes of CryPTOGAME, for example, wherein they're selling cats, making them breedable, siring them, and giving them that opportunity to create something out of that. Item-first economy is powered by the blockchain. What happens here is that people can create their items first, pre-sell these items, and then whatever they can pre-sell from these items, they could use the proceeds to create games in the future. What we have here is that these items that gets created on, right now it's on the Ethereum blockchain, but at some point in the future there are probably going to be more blockchain that's going to support non-fungible, or a certain kind of standard that they have, which is similar to ERC 721, right? These items are valuable and scarce. There is real ownership of these items because these are items that extends from being something physical to something digital. And this digital item is something that you own for life until you get rid of it, or trade it, or sell it, or forget your wallet ID and disappears forever, which how I lost my cats. And it's also playable on other games. Obviously, we have to rally the developer community here to ensure that these games or these game items can be accepted from one game to another. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done here. There's a lot of standardization that needs to be put in place in order for us to be able to have a pool of game developers who create game items and also create games for these items to exist. And what I'm trying to say here is that fundamentally, games and game items can now be separated. While in the past, when we create items, it's always in existence with the game itself. Right now, game items can be owned completely detached from a game, but that game item in itself can also be played within that game. It can be played within several games that accepts these items, right? And so this is where we try to cultivate the ecosystem of gaming and blockchain because it's very, very new, right? But the possibility of this being something that's groundbreaking and life-changing is going to be, it has yet to be seen, right? So it is possible now that you can play Space Invaders without the invaders, or with different sets of invaders, because you can actually put in different kinds of items floating through space, not just those ones that you see right now on the slides. And this is where we talk about virtual items and the likes of CryptoKitties, the like of CryptoBots, and Crypto Saga, and even Crypto Space Commander, which I believe they're here, right? So we call them virtual items. We call them crypto items. We call them non-fungible tokens. Right now, the standard is ERC 721, but there could be more. At some point in the future, each gaming blockchain would probably employ something very similar to what ERC 7, Ethereum is able to do, right? And good thing about these items right here, they're unique, and that is something that you own, right? What could possibly be done here, and I think this is what I see that most people are doing right now in the space, is they're doing what you call an initial item offering, right? So we sort of like, okay, what are they trying to do? They make their items first. ERC 721 item. They pre-sell their items. The game isn't there yet, but the items already exist. Its value, it has an artwork right attached to it, and there's proof of ownership for these specific items, right? And what they need to do is just mint these items, pre-sell these items, and once they get the money out of the pre-selling of their items, they develop these items. And at first I thought, the idea might be, overreaching, right? But we've seen time and again a lot of people pre-selling or selling their items without any games just yet, right? And this is just the beginning. And I understand that at this point, in terms of like game core loop, it's quite different just yet because it's new. Like the Ethereum blockchain cannot handle as much transactions as we hope it would get. But at some point in the future, there will be games that are fun, that are fundamentally away from just thinking about the blockchain itself. Because a lot of times right now, when you play a game on the blockchain, you know that you're playing a game on the blockchain. And sometimes it's not that fun. Sometimes it's full of friction, right? There's a lot of hoops that you need to jump to for you to be able to like finally get that robot and like get it fighting with another robot, for example. So as an idea, what we want to put in here is like, all right, we can try to do something which we call an initial item offering. And I think that a lot of game developers are doing that now. Some of them will stop at selling the items, but some of them, or I hope most of them, would go further and create games for these items that they sold. Okay, so what could happen here is this. So as a developer, I create games or I create crypto items. Or sometimes I can create both the games and the crypto items attached to it. But I do not limit myself with the items that I've created myself. I allow other items to be played in my game. I allow these items to be available in my game, right? With ALTO, we're trying to do tools that would allow game developers to mint these items. At the same time, whatever they mint goes into an item catalog. So imagine a huge tapestry of items. As a game developer, I already have an existing captive audience, and all I need to do is to look into the tapestry of items and say, all right, this cats right here have 20,000 users, or 20,000 owners of this specific cats that bought the items. I could make a game out of these cats. And what happens is that these cat owners can be notified saying, hey, there's a game created for your cats. Do you want to try it? You already have an existing audience that could play your game. You're basically lending these objects. You're lending these items utility, which in a way increases the value of the items that they own. And that is the premise of what we're trying to do at ALTO. At some point, once these game items are there in a tapestry, any game developer can come in and create items to add to the tapestry or create games that is within the catalog of items that we already have. And that is something that I think a lot of game developers are already thinking about as well. And it's just a matter of like having this unifying tool or platform that allows everybody to create something that's very interoperable. Because I know for a fact that what we're doing right now is different standards for different ERC-721 tokens. There's different specifications. But if we're able to like unify everything else and everyone, it's much easier for these game developers to lend attributes to these tokens. As an example right here, and this is not a real game, obviously. So the idea here is that game items are now interoperable, and that game environment can be created for several different game items, right? So as a game developer, I have two choices. I either just create game items, or I create game environment where these game items can be played in. So in the near future, it wouldn't be surprising to see an action game where you see a crypto zombie and a crypto kitty interacting with each other, and could be a potion of some sort that is also a game item. So all of them are ERC-721 items that can be interplayed within a specific environment, right? And it is not also far off that at some point this action game can turn into a card game, another game, where items are now interoperable. So the thing here is that game developers are responsible for putting attributes to the items that are in the tapestry, right? All they need to do is to read which specific item they want to read through their wallets, put it in their game and say, all right, I want this specific crypto kitty. I'm going to change the art a little bit because my game is a pixel game. I'm going to put some strength attributes into the CryptoKitty in my game, but this same CryptoKitty may be different in terms of strength, in terms of attributes in another game, right? But the proof of ownership of the item is there. And if I own that item, I can play it on both games that have been developed for my cats. At the moment, our essential core loop for games on the blockchain is very basic, right? CryptoKitty, for example, what you need to do is to buy the cat, you can breed the cat, and then you can sell the cat, right? By ETH, for example. Then It's just the loop right there. It's buy and sell and breed, right? And I think that it's wise that a lot of game developers are already building on top of CryptoKitties to ensure that there are games where CryptoKitties can be played in, right? In the future, I think that most game developers would think of the same loop that we currently have, but there is an innate valuable usage that could happen in a specific game. And as mentioned a while ago, some of you guys were saying, like, what's the value of these items? The value of these items would be in utility, right? The more games gets to integrate these items into, the more utility your item would have, and the more value your item would also get, right? And if your game item does not have any games where you can play it in, then at the very least you have a specific token, which is so much better than backing up a Kickstarter project where you don't get anything other than a lanyard or a t-shirt. And next thing you know, after 2 years, the project isn't happening, right? So this is where we're looking at. And obviously, a lot of game developers can create more loops, can create more different types of economies that are immensely possible right now with the blockchain. As an example, with games on the blockchain, a few of our friends at Parsec Frontier, they're doing something wonderful with their project. Neon District, there's also a lot of other game projects right now that are out there. Crypto Space Commander, I was corrected a couple of, oh, that's the correct figure right there. Last night I was like asking them, how much did you raise pre-selling your items? And it's like 140K USD. And they're like, no, not anymore. It's now at $240,000 USD for pre-selling the spaceships that are in Crypto Space Commander. And I believe it's still happening, is it? No? Right. But basically, the sky's the limits in terms of item offerings. And this is something that is going to happen. It's going to be a thing. And we'd like to continue and contribute forward in terms of like, how do we lower down the barrier to entry for most game developers to include themselves into creating these game items. So to cap it off, ALTO as a platform, what we're doing is we're building suites of tools that allow game developers to mint items on the blockchain. It's an ALTO item builder, as we call it. And also, once you have these items that you created through ALTO, we also allow you to create a storefront where you can sell these items. You can sell these items through the ALTO storefront, or you can create your own storefront, which you can embed in your website, right? And you can also connect these items into other marketplaces, into other storefronts if you wish to, and that's not a problem. And at the very least, there's multiple uses of where you can actually put it into. And lastly, it would allow game developers to connect these game items on the blockchain through the ALTO backpack. Allowing them to have a gateway or portal through different exchanges that we can partner up with. So in a way, what the ALTO backpack will do is to show your game items, not just your ERC20 items, but also your game items, like a backpack in World of Warcraft, for example, where you have your tokenized items, your swords, your mace, your robes, whatever the item is, right? And you can also see, we're also going to make it like a social graph where you can see your friends' items, and you can actually create like a peer-to-peer trading initiation for that one. If you want to say, hey, I want your token, I want your backpack, or I want your sword, or whatever item that is that you wanted to. So that's what we're building at the moment. And just a couple of announcements. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to put out an ALTO Developer Challenge. So what we're trying to do here is we've created sets of items. It's a fantasy-themed items, a couple of thousands of them. And what we want game developers is to create prototype of a game around these items. Basically, what we want is to have that level of interoperability that these items that exist on ALTO can be played and can be used and utilized from one game to another. So the way it would look like is like you gotta have to pitch your crypto game. Top 3 will be chosen, and then the best demo wins the grand prize. It's an ongoing thing, and it's more details about this will come out in the next few days. Top 3 pitches would win $25,000 cash each, and the winning demo would have $35,000, $30,000, and $10,000. So it's a very small developer challenge that we're trying to do here, but what we're really looking after would be to see what game developers can do with the blockchain other than creating items. Because what we really need right now are items plus the games where they can be played in. And I think that everybody within the space is trying their hardest to cultivate that community. And I think that's a really, really good thing. So that's up for me today. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. And if you want to reach out to me, that's my contact details right there. It's pretty short than the title of my game.
Excellent. Thanks, James.
Thank you, guys.
So we're running a bit late, but we will take one question. Oh, there's 2 questions.
Yes.
Just wait for the microphone. You can say who you are and which company you're with.
Hi, I'm Lucy from E&E Finance. I think this is a brilliant idea, but how much of the realization of the implementation of this would be based on the great relationship between you and all those big name gaming companies? And how much do you think you can actually put this into reality?
I think one of the things that we're trying to achieve here is not just to work with big gaming companies, but to work with mid-scale to small-scale gaming companies. We want to give them that opportunity or chance to at least sort of level the playing field. I know that for a fact that the use case of an item creator extends more than just to gaming. It could be extended into creating a bespoke art. It could be extended into creating items for a charity relief program, for example, where you pre-sell charity items. Let's say you partner up with Red Cross and whatnot. But the opportunity here of putting tokens into the blockchain or putting ERC-721 for now on the blockchain easier than before makes it a little bit more lucrative for smaller game developers to not necessarily have to learn a great deal of solidity and just easily create these items right away without necessarily competing with a different space, which is usually what the big game developers are still doing right now, which is the free-to-play model. Because right now this model is completely different. The model on the blockchain does not necessarily mirror the same free-to-play model aspect that most big game companies are doing. But we want to start out with the mid-scale and the small-scale developers for now in terms of making them more successful on the blockchain.
Okay. Last question there.
Hi, working? Yep. Justin Larrabee, former Backflip indie game dev. Yep. Could you clarify what the business model is for the game creator? Because it seems skewed towards, I would want to be the one creating the items. Mm-hmm. I mean, is it meant I sell my game and then you get to use your items, or is it a hybrid approach?
It's there are different approaches as to how people would do it. At the moment, there's a couple of game developers that are doing a hybrid approach where there's still a free-to-play element into their game, but they implement tokenization in such a way where, let's for example, Gabby's company right there doing an incremental idle game that is still free-to-play, but there is an element of tokens into their games itself. What happens is that they pull in the wallet information of anyone who's playing their games, and if there's any CryptoKitty in there, that CryptoKitty will show in their game, and they put attributes on that specific CryptoKitty. So there are 2 players here that's going to happen. One would be the item makers, and one would be the game makers. And what we're trying to do is to facilitate the creation of the items. There will also be part of the project wherein we're going to try to support the ecosystem by encouraging game developers to create games and motivating them to allow as much game items to be accepted in their games. The biggest question is here is as a game developer, what's in it for me if I accept these multiple items, right? Because in a way, I'm just lending utility out of these multiple items, but what do I get in return, right? And this is something that we're trying to solve by partnering up with exchanges, for example, ERC-721 exchanges, to sort of have this level of, I'd say, royalty or commission, wherein the more you accept game items and the more game items traded into your game itself, you get a cut out of the trade that happens within your game. So let's say, for example, you put in a specific exchange within your game. if that exchange happens internally within that specific game because there are game items that are accepted within your game, then you get a cut and commission out of that. But obviously, like, this needs to be polished even further because we really need to make sure that both sides of the ecosystem benefits a lot from having this. And this is not something that ALTO is specifically doing on its own. There's a lot of different projects doing this as well, and I think that's a good thing.